Anthony C. Ferrati is a name that might be synonymous with shark movies, as he directed the original Sharknado. And here he returns with Blind Waters, an asylum-produced shark movie made for the Tubi streaming service. So Blind Waters, a low-budget, more serious kind of movie than Sharknado, although it still falls in the kind of low-budget, kind of campy style kind of shark movies. What is the story? It primarily focuses on a young couple who are on vacation somewhere. We don't exactly know where. I don't think they actually said. Anyway, and they hire a boat to kind of go out sort of scuba diving, and the guy wants to propose to the girl and all of this. And they are attacked by a seemingly rogue large shark who has previously attacked another boat and killed most of the people from that boat. And they kind of end up, this couple end up sort of on the top of this kind of capsized boat, trying to obviously fend off this shark. But in an added wrinkle, the girl actually ends up knocking her head and loses the majority of her sight, which makes things even more difficult. And add to that, you also have a human killer who also may well cause problems for our couple. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss Blind Waters. So there's a lot of shark films, isn't there? There's quite a lot, and a lot of them are kind of low budget pish, you might say. How does this one fare? Has this got any plus points, despite the fact that it's obviously made for the asylum, from the asylum, for Tubi? Okay, so, I mean, it tries to have some original elements. The fact that we have one of our protagonists ends up becoming kind of, for the most part, blind, and then we have this added serial killer as well. Well, kind of, maybe not serial killer, but killer, gives it a little bit more than your regular kind of, standard shark film. There's a little bit more wrinkles, so to speak. So there is that. And I will say, I have to be honest, I mean, you have to bear in mind this is a low budget movie. It's relatively kind of well shot, I will say. So I actually kind of quite like the kind of the technical elements here, the way this was shot. There's actually some pretty good kind of sequences, for example, where we finally sort of see the boat sink, and we kind of see it from a submerged view, and there's a couple of kind of decent shots of the shark, which they primarily use as CGI, but it's a little bit of stock footage, and then there's a couple of shots where I think the CGI looks okay. Yeah, so there's some okay kind of technical elements on display here. You know, I can't really fault the technical prowess here. It's all kind of fairly proficiently kind of put together. You can hear everyone. You can kind of see everything is in frame. Things like this. I didn't think the acting was too bad, to be honest. I mean, I'm judging this based on peers like other kind of B movies and things like this, but I didn't think the acting was terrible. I thought the actors here, especially our main couple, did a reasonable job of making a kind of believable sort of couple. Yeah, it's a little bit kind of hokey at times, but you know, I'm aware I'm watching a kind of a B movie, so I'm kind of prepared for this kind of level of kind of characterization and acting. But I thought they did an okay job here. I actually quite like the idea of this killer, because I mean, I think they could have done more with it, to be honest. But he's actually, we see that he has killed at least one person. And he hasn't helped other people, but he does genuinely help our couple. I mean, he ends up kind of being a problem for them as well. But on occasion, he does actually help our couple, and they probably would have been in more trouble had he not been there. Now, it's a low-budget B movie. He ends up kind of being your typical kind of bad guy. But there was elements here where it could have been interesting, or it could have been more interesting. You know, we've got a guy who is a killer and who is out for himself and is kind of trying to at least rob them, but he does end up helping, and you know, it could have been an interesting kind of story where we have this sort of shades of grey, and what would you do? Kind of morally questionable people might still do good things in sometimes. but not in others. But we're talking about what could have been. I mean, what we get is only kind of the merest hint at that, and I think the one aspect where this movie, it would have had a bit of originality, they didn't really pick up the ball and run with it. Which leads me to what doesn't work. So the whole concept of this girl being blind, I didn't really feel affected the film all that much, to be honest. I mean, she can see, it's just very blurry, and I didn't really feel it had a huge impact on what was happening on screen. I mean, there's a couple of instances where we have follow my voice and things, and she has to kind of swim out without us knowing that she can't really see, but she still does that, and she would have done the same could she have seen, if that makes sense. So I didn't really feel it was really added all that much to the actual story. And as I've mentioned, I think there was a missed opportunity here to have a very nuanced character with a killer who was reprehensible and certainly has done bad things, but he still chooses to help on occasion. And it was how would you deal with a person like that? That could have been a really interesting idea, but it's not. Nothing's done with it. So I think the ideas that they introduced, they only really scratched the surface of these kind of these new elements, and ultimately it was squandered. I mean, let's be honest with you, the whole reason why we have human bad guys in films like this is so we can have drama and kind of tension without the need for special effects. That's why films like this tends to have kind of human bad guys. It's just to sort of pad out the running time without having to then spend expensive shots with VFX work and things like that. But I do feel this was a missed opportunity to have a genuinely kind of interesting moral dilemma with a character who is, ultimately a bad guy, but could show some helpful kind of tendencies here and there. But anyway, as I've mentioned, the shark is kind of for the most part CGI outside of a couple of stock footage sequences, and for the most part it's not great. The shark kind of moves in an unnatural kind of floaty kind of CGI way. Doesn't really feel like it's got any weight behind it. There's a couple of shots where I think it looks okay, but for the most part it's kind of fairly kind of weak. So the shark isn't anything too good. There's a couple of reasonable attacks at the beginning, but part of the problem with this movie is the fact that we're calling it Blind Waters. We know our female protagonist is the main character and is pretty much wearing plot armor, and it's fairly obvious that she's going to be the one that's going to be walking out of this movie just by the title. So there's not a lot of tension in this film really, because I didn't feel like it kind of who will live, who will die. It's fairly obvious. So there's a few kind of sequences in this movie where we have our kind of Coast Guards, but they don't really do much either. Again, it's just to kind of pad out the kind of the runtime and things like this. There's some very obvious use of kind of day for night sequences where they shoot during the day and then darken the screen to make it look like it's kind of at night, and it never really works, to be honest with you. I think it looks quite horrible on screen, and obviously I suppose it would have been more difficult to film at night, but instead they use this, but whatever. There's some very silly elements in this movie. It is a B movie. It's not trying to be particularly realistic, so to speak, even though it's not a spoof movie like Sharknado. There's some extremely kind of some dumb elements, things that happen in the movie that are kind of ignored a little later on, or for example, we have there's this storm, and then that storm is conveniently forgotten about after just a small shower of rain. Things like this, but there's also some other kind of more overt kind of silly things that happen. So, what do we think of this movie overall then? So, yeah, it's a low-budget, asylum-produced shark movie. You probably know what you're going to get with this. There was some kind of basic entertainment level to be had here. I don't think it's the worst kind of shark film, and I think the extra elements did add a little bit of originality to it. But although I definitely think there could have been more done with that. But as a general kind of shark film, it was okay. It's very predictable, but very kind of silly at the same time with low budget CGI sharks. But it wasn't a terrible film. It's still somewhat watchable. You know, fairly well filmed and not badly acted, I would say. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? And I'll look forward to seeing you next time.